Hello, folks. Omri here. I hope you're well. I've done a bit of a deeper dive into the notion of decentering whiteness. It was not exhaustive research. It was still a meta scan, but here's what I found. One, a significant amount of this research is focused on higher education. And that means occasionally it's in secondary education, but most of it's on the academy. So this means focused on about 50 plus or minus percentage of a population that are college educated in the United States. Remember that United States piece in particular. A lot of the decentering whiteness dialogues, papers, articles are light on solutions and heavy on reviewing what I would consider problems that we're familiar with and have been talked about quite a bit. Micro-inequities, aggressions, racial, wealth gap, slavery, lived experience, the global north hegemony, etc. And of course, focusing on support of the most marginalized, which is a pretty common theme as well. A lot of the literature talks about decentering white comfort. I wasn't sure if that was the equivalent of Southern comfort, but and I'll stop joking about that. But what pretty much all of this literature does absolutely is center the United States of America, its history, atrocities, and social norms. Now, I think it's important to understand that history and those social norms, but to center that means that you're centering, 10 to 15 plus percent of the world. Doesn't mean that the United States isn't immensely influential, but to center that alone, it's an incomplete notion at its best. Most of what I concluded is similar to what I concluded in the first video that I shot. Decentering is predominantly an academic term. It doesn't fully consider global context. Yes, there is an absolute need for people of all race, colors, and creeds to understand history. That is something that we have not done a good job at as we can, and we still are working on it, even those of us that are anti-racism educators and decolonialist thinkers. We haven't done enough of our real deep dive into really bringing history into light. We wanted to push oftentimes things that were ideological, but not necessarily fully and contextually historical in the broadest sense of the notion. So we need to do all of these things, and the audience that most decentering whiteness conversations have been targeted towards are those who are already converted, somewhat anti-racism educators, practitioners, academics. The other thing that I think is important is there was this notion of a reference human, and this reference human, we've probably heard it before, is usually white and straight and male, and the anti-racism educators purport to want to decenter this notion of this white, straight, male reference human or reference man. It's not the same reference human or reference man everywhere. Consider pre and post-colonial times throughout the world. Is it the same reference human in every geography, historically and presently? And the answer is we know the world is much more complex than this reduction to decenter the feelings of a monolithic notion of whiteness. There are many more variables to consider, and if we truly want to reconstruct organizational and societal systems for equality or equity and inclusion, we have to consider those variables, and we have to do so honestly and fearlessly. We must lean in to that complexity with pure honesty and as fearlessly as we can, even discovering things that we don't necessarily want to acknowledge because they're uncomfortable for those of us that have had a particular way of talking and thinking about this. So that's me on decentering whiteness, scratching the surface, really open to hear what your thoughts are if you're so inclined. I love dialogue, and this is a topic that I think we need to go into more depth on to understand if it's creating the conditions, creating what we're trying to create in our organizations and our societies. Substack newsletter Reconstructing Inclusion is now available. I will share some thoughts from Reconstructing Inclusion and go into a little more depth in some pieces. I hope it's going to be helpful to your learning and practice. And I hope this video was helpful. Make it a great day. Peace.